Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Chapter 14, Community Water Fluoridation. I hope you're having a great day and you're super excited to learn a little bit more about community water fluoridation. I want to just put this little caveat out there that this is my first podcast and I don't really know what I'm doing, so I might have a lot of ums and whatnot because I have to record this in one fell swoop in order for you to hear it all. So forgive me for not being so great at recording. Here we go. So the next slide. There we go. Okay, now you just get to hear me talking. Awesome. Okay, so community water fluoridation. It is one of the 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century. That means there's 9 other ones, and we're going to go ahead and talk about those a little bit later. But know that it is a really great public health achievement. Community water fluoridation is also one of the most cost-effective preventive dental programs available. Community water fluoridation provides significant cost savings for a community. It's a practical, safe means for reducing and controlling the occurrence of tooth decay in a community. And there are many factors that contribute to this determination, but just suffice it to say that it's extremely cost effective. Fluoridation is also an effective intervention and sound public policy. It can be enacted by legislative action or administrative action. And because of this, because it is public policy and it can constantly be changing, it's important that the oral health professional always stay well informed of fluoridation in their community and state. So what is community water fluoridation? It's defined as the adjustment of the natural fluoride in community's water supply to an optimum level for dental health. So back between the 50s and the 80s, fluoridation contributed to a dramatic decline in dental caries. And it continues to really be one of the most effective ways to reduce and prevent tooth decay today. Community water fluoridation has been challenged by vocal components since its inception. So there's always opposition to fluoridation. It's a hot trigger point, especially in a public political climate. Support can be influenced by public opinion, political climate, the media. The media is a huge factor. Voter turnout, knowledge, skills, political savvy, external forces, key community leaders, and other factors. So that's why I was saying it's always very important to stay in tune with your community and your state in as far as community water fluoridation, because as political climates change and you may get new policymakers in, they may want to make changes to community water fluoridation. It is a huge trigger point in politics, so one that always has a tendency to bring controversy. So that gets them the media attention. And then fluoride, you should also know, is naturally occurring in the water. It also is in soil and plants, and it's even in the air. Fluoridation is the upward adjustment of the natural fluoride level in a community's water supply to a level for optimal dental health. The U.S. Public Health Service established non-regulatory standards for optimal concentrations of fluoride in drinking water. And these standards are based on the annual average of maximum daily air temperatures. So they based how much fluoride they would add to the community water supply based on air temperatures. But then in 2011, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services updated the 1962 U.S. Public Health Service drinking water standards and recommended that 0.7 to 1.2 milligrams per liter as the optimal fluoride level. So they didn't want to go less than 0.7, but they don't want to go greater than 1.2, as they found that that was an optimal level. This level provides the best balance of protection from dental caries while limiting the risk of dental fluorosis. Fluoridation is an example of an ideal public health intervention. And what does that mean? So it's an ideal intervention that's put into place publicly, but it benefits all ages. So it's not just for kids or just for the elderly. Everybody benefits from fluoridation. It's also socially equitable, so it means that it's not just in affluent communities, it's in poor communities as well. It imparts continuous protection with no compliance or conscious effort required. People don't have to think about taking a pill or, putting something in something. It's just in the water. They don't think about it, and it does them good. It works without requiring individuals to access care. So they don't have to drive somewhere and go get it, a prescription or, a shot or, anything like that. And it's not painful like vaccinations. So there's no aversion to wanting to access it. And like I said before, it's very cost effective. So what are the 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century? So obviously vaccinations are a big one, and also another controversial trigger point with politics and the political climate. Motor vehicle safety. Remember back in the, the 60s when we didn't even have to wear seatbelts. And you would sit in the back of the car or you'd take a ride in the back of the pickup truck. I remember those days because I'm aging myself. Anyway, now we have all these regulations, especially with child seats and all that kind of stuff. Workplaces are safer. Control of infectious diseases, decline in deaths from heart disease and stroke, safer and healthier foods, healthier mothers and babies, family planning, fluoridation of drinking water, and the recognition of tobacco use as a health hazard. So all of these things have been extremely great achievements in regard to public health. The history of community water fluoridation. The history of community water fluoridation in the United States can be traced back to the first decade of the 20th century. So back in the 1900s. And it had basically 4 phases. There was a clinical discovery phase, and that was roughly 1901 to 1933. And it was characterized by the pursuit of knowledge to determine the cause of developmental enamel defects present in people exposed to naturally occurring high levels of fluoride in drinking water in certain western areas of the United States. Then we moved into the epidemiologic phase, which lasted from 1933 to 1945. And it had concern about the discovery of fluoride in the water, which led to the appointment of Dr. Dean, a commissioned officer in the U.S. Public Health Service. And he was the sole person in what was called the Dental Hygiene Unit, part of a newly established National Institute of Health. And his job was to map out the prevalence of mottled enamel across the country and to look for a way to reduce or eliminate it. Then it moved into the demonstration phase, which was the third period, and it began in January of 1945 and was characterized by a series of community trials in which fluoride levels were adjusted in the public drinking water supply. And on January 25th, 1945, I think that was the day my dad was born. That's cool. In Grand Rapids, Michigan, he became the first, Grand Rapids, Michigan became the first city in the world to fluoridate its drinking water as a measure to promote dental health and prevent disease. And then we moved into the fourth phase, which was the technology transfer phase, which began around 1950, when planning began in earnest for the implementation of fluoridation in many large U.S. cities. And continuing to this day, the technology transfer phase is characterized by the establishment of a set of national health goals, which include fluoridation. So in the early 1900s, it was discovered that in communities with naturally occurring high levels of fluoride in the drinking water supply, fluorosis was common. So we call it fluorosis now, but as you heard me say previously, Dr. Dean was charged with figuring out why all these patients had mottled enamel. So you can see from the pictures, this is what mottled enamel or fluorosis looks like. And you could probably surmise that, having patients come in and having teeth look like this might cause some, red flags to go up and think, why do these people have this? And the biggest thing was that they were correlating patients with fluorosis with also having a very low rate of caries. So I think that was the light bulb moment that set everything, into motion to figure out what they could do to make this help everyone. To help everyone and actually, reduce this fluorosis that they were seeing. So to basically control it in some way. So the mechanisms of action of fluoride. Fluoride works in three ways to reduce and prevent tooth decay. So systemically and topically, but it works topically in two different ways. So we want to separate out those two different topical mechanisms. So systemically, obviously, it's being ingested, it's going into your body, and we do that by eating different foods, drinking beverages. So we have lots of different foods that, pick up fluoride from the soil, and so we're getting small amounts of fluoride that way. But through community water fluoridation, we see a higher level of benefit because you're ingesting more fluoride on a regular basis, and this is helping to strengthen the teeth. And then topically, the first way is by topical action of fluoride in plaque and saliva. So this helps to enhance remineralization. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in this lecture, but also in the next lecture in chapter 15 when we talk and go a little bit more in depth with topical applications of fluoride. And then the second way that we have is topically is by topical interaction with bacteria in the plaque, which reduces acid production. So, reducing acid production is helping to reduce caries, and topical fluoride in plaque and saliva is helping to remineralize teeth. So back in around the 70s, they started to take a look at school children and the prevalence of decay in school children. I'm not exactly sure why it's divided when we get into the late 80s to 2002, why we changed ages. My guess on that is that the age of school children increased, where back in the 70s, kids were starting, they were starting school just before or at age 5, and now we see a little bit later start date. But what we see, it still is a great result. What we see here in the graph on the left is that they were looking at decayed, missing, and filled surfaces of school children. And back in the early 70s, you see they had 7 surfaces, but by 1999 to 2000, we're down to 2.7 surfaces. And then the graph on the right, I love, because you can see in that same time period, we go from 26% of children being caries free. So they're looking at all these children, and 26% have no cavities, which means 74% of kids in the 70s had cavities. And you take that to the far right, 1999 to 2002, 58% are caries free. So we go from this extreme, and why? What is it? What is it that causes this great benefit and reduction in caries with children? Well, fluoridation. Now, fluoridation has risks and benefits, and the greatest risk is fluorosis, and the greatest benefit is caries prevention. So being able to find that balance. And through the years, there have been standards and regulations put into place that help to reduce the risk. But as you can see, community water fluoridation has greatly decreased the risk of caries in the United States. So I think here we can surmise that the benefits definitely outweigh the risks. There are 3 additives that are used for water fluoridation in the United States. The first is sodium fluoride, and this was the first additive used to control water fluoridation programs and is still used in smaller communities. Those communities are typically fewer than 5,000 people. The sodium fluoride, it comes in a granular or powder, and it is, of the 3, the most expensive. And then you have sodium silicofluoride, which is less expensive than sodium fluoride. It is also granular, and it's used in communities of 5,000 to 50,000 people. But then you have the most frequently used compound for water fluoridation, hydrofluorosilicic acid. And this comes in liquid form, and it's low cost, and it's used mostly in large communities of over 50,000 people. The determination of the appropriate compound to use in fluoridation depends on the type of distribution system that is used by the individual water plant. And for this reason, we typically see an inverse relationship with fluoridation cost per person being lower in large communities and higher in small communities. Monitoring and surveillance of fluoridation. For fluoridation to be properly implemented, a number of factors should be considered. Hyperfluoridation occurs when an excess amount of fluoride is added to the drinking water over several days. Water fluoridation systems prevent excess fluoride, and they do that in relatively 3 different ways. First, they use metering pumps. Second, they're limiting amount of fluoride in the day tanks, and they're using proper controls to feed fluoride from hoppers to distilling tanks. So you could see that through the years, they have really developed a lot of protocols and standards in order to make sure that hyperfluoridation does not occur. So many countries without centralized water distribution systems have chosen to add fluoride to table salt, and that process is known as salt fluoridation. This provides many primary benefits of dental caries prevention to those populations. So as many as 40 to 200 million people use this vehicle. And then we also have milk fluoridation, which is the addition of 5 milligrams of fluoride to 1 liter of milk. And this has been introduced as a vehicle of school-based fluoride delivery in some countries. And then I just thought that I would also throw in the fluoride mouth rinses, because those were developed in the 60s, and they're also used in schools, especially without water fluoridation and in schools with a higher rate of caries. So just to summarize everything, community water fluoridation is the